start recording then.
The
Okay,
meeting-
folks, this is episode 43 of Going South. Really excited today to talk with someone that I've been wanting to talk with for some time now. She is Gwen Sommers Redwine. She is a Valdosta native. Has spent a bit of her life in Douglasville, Georgia. She is a VSU, or Valdosta State College, communications major that went on to do broadcasting with CNN, WTBS, WAOK radio, WVLD locally. He's got a long, illustrious history in the broadcasting industry in a variety of formats. We were just talking about that before I started recording. She's also kind of the founder of Redrawing Group LLC that's done TV production in for years, local TV programming up in Douglasville, Georgia. So she's got this kind of broadcasting background, and Gwen, if I get anything wrong, feel free to jump in. But I have met her through Facebook and her work here in Valdosta with a Valdosta Black Heritage Group. I'm assuming maybe you're the founder of that group. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I'm the founder.
Okay. And in y'all's mission statement on Facebook, it says you're about restoring and preserving endangered Black history. From the segregation to the kind of integration period. So I'm a member of that group and I see the work that they do. And we were talking the other day, and a lot of the elders in the Black community are people I know who are educators and so forth. So we talked about Ruth and Ralph Council, but all that to say, Gwen, thank you so much for making time to chat with me today. We talked a little bit about this the other day when we were talking about doing the podcast. How did you, were you all, I mean, you're out of the broadcasting kind of world. How did you kind of make the transition to getting interested in kind of preserving local history, especially the history here?
Well, I started diligently preserving history in my community where I live, Douglasville, Georgia, Douglas County. And I was just always interested in, I guess, history, because even at WTBS and WTCG, I produced a documentary there recording history of the decade of Blacks in America for the 70s. It's the only documentary, I believe, that WTCG/WTBS produced about that subject matter during that genre of broadcasting history.
Wow.
It got a really huge rating. We got a Black company to sponsor it for $20,000. I did. Ted Turner paid me a cash bonus of $2,000 for doing that. You should see the memos that went back and forth about that. Wow. And the sales people didn't hardly know how to react to it, because I'm sure Ted said to them, that money's been out there all that long time. How come you all didn't go out and get that money? I didn't know then I could sell, but I learned later I could sell. Right. So I recorded history then, even when I was there. And I even did another documentary on WAOK radio, the history of WAOK radio. We can't seem to find that footage, but I think I know who has it.
Gotcha.
I think I'm gonna get it one day. But and then in Douglasville, I come and I find this Beulah Grove Lodge, which is a combination of a Masonic lodge. As we learned later, it was a lineage of the Prince Hall Lodge Masons, which Maynard Jackson's, who was the former mayor of Atlanta's father, was a founder of. So we traced that history, but it really ended up being a branch off chapter, York Wright Masons, that built this lodge, and the bottom portion was the school, they call it the Negro School, top was where the lodge met. There are only two in the state of Georgia. We discovered that one, and I ended up about 2 years researching it, and we ended up getting it on the National Register of Historic Places. I wrote the narrative for that, so I can say that I actually placed this building, and I'm being credited for that for some reason now. People are talking about that now. So I spent all that time, not just doing that in Douglasville, but I was really, I did a bunch of stuff. At one time, I was serving on something like 4 boards. Wow. And I chaired one and was officers probably, only in the other one. And in the other ones I just served. I was just into the community. So when I came home and noticed all this stuff that was going on, which I didn't even notice it right away.
Home being Valdosta.
Huh?
Home
meaning in Valdosta, Georgia, seeing about my family, the home, the graves, and just, general things you do when you go home. but my brother had passed, and that was where we buried him. And for some reason, that awakened something in me. I'd been going home, but for some reason, I didn't notice the blight in the community, the disparity between the one side and the other, probably because the overpass hadn't been there. So maybe that's, I don't know, something just awakened me. And then I started looking closer, and I discovered that it was a huge disparity in what was going on one side versus another side, and you can see it. It's clear. I mean, it's not even, there's no even attempt to disguise it. It's just in your face. This is one community and that's the other one.
Right.
And
can you talk a little bit about, like, because we talked about this other day, but for those folks who aren't from Valdosta, there's an overpass that goes down South 41, and it goes over a series of railroad tracks. Can you talk about why that installation of that bridge is so relevant to kind of the historical preservation on the south side of town here? Because a lot of folks wouldn't know.
Well, actually, what that bridge did was it infiltrated probably the most historic part of the Black American heritage. It infiltrated it, encroached upon it, and essentially destroyed any future plans for any development in that area. And the planners of the city had to have known that's what was going on, because they planned the city. Do you understand? Planners plan how your city looks.
Well, and what we're really talking about, because we talked about, I moved here in 1971, so it wasn't there. And there were a variety of Black-owned businesses right there, the long-term, ranging from shoe repair to television repair to barbecue to would go down the list, right?
Yes.
And that overpass essentially, like you said, killed it. And I don't know if you were here once they completed it, but the justification, right, was that emergency vehicles would get stopped at the railroad track, was the justification for it. But they built it and didn't build it over all the railroad tracks. So now when they finished it, you'd be stuck waiting for the train, but now you're stuck on the bridge.
And you know what? Now you're racing to get across the track anyway. Since I've been in Valdosta, I don't care who I'm with, from a local who's driving, they hear, oh my God, they have so many ways they try to get around that train other than that overpass. You know, so it's like, oh my God. But I think I've used this term before. I believe the citizens of Valdosta have been bamboozled. My grandparents were bragging about the overpass and how now they wouldn't have to sit at the train track. They sold that to the Black community as though it were a convenience. However, we now know that it was not a convenience for them. Now we see one of our Facebook members made a mention of Crane Avenue, and you are a Facebook member, you may have recalled reading that. And she was saying that on Crane Avenue, that her family, series of families that owned a strip along that Crane Avenue these were flourishing, profitable, active businesses that were just wiped out because of that placement. What I see when I go downtown, at the middle of the day, I see nothing. No people, it's deserted. What kind of message are we sending to our young people about our heritage? And this is what they call the South Side Historic District.
Well,
it's been labeled that, and that's embarrassing to me.
Did they use eminent domain to do it?
I don't know.
And the reason I ask, the Associated Press years ago did a whole week series of how eminent domain law had been used against African Americans in the Deep South to basically steal tens of thousands of acres of land for baseball fields, for interstate highways. It was always kind of the Black community that was targeted for, major thoroughfares, right? And I'm just wondering if the history of the overpass, if that was a part of the argument,
We have not been able to go into minutes of these meetings yet. We do have someone researching minutes of certain meetings that took place. We've not actually thought about eminent domain possibilities and violations of it yet, but thank you for putting that on my long list of things to do. I'll just add that one more. But yes, that's interesting. That would be something interesting to look at. The reason why, and even this may be related as to why they could have done that overpass. You and I were reading the duties of the Historic Preservation Commission. Well, one of the duties is to protect the historic integrity of these districts from unsympathetic players. That's the words they use it, unsympathetic players. Unsympathetic players came into our community. They were probably living here the whole while anyway.
And certainly not from the community.
They destroyed from 1981 until now, bit by bit, they destroyed little pieces of that community into where it looks like it looks now. If it had been within the local historic district, which the Historic Preservation Commission governs, they wouldn't have been able to do that easily.
Yeah, well, let's back up and tell folks. So the city of Valdosta has a Historic Preservation Commission, right? Yes. Mm-hmm. How long has that been in place? Do you know?
Yes, since 1981. Apparently, around this country, the Department of, I want to say the Department of Interior mandated, or Parks and Recreation, with whatever department this over historical preservation, I think it's Interior, Department of Interior, mandated that the states adopt ordinances to protect our local history, because we're at this time in the history of America where things were aging. Historically, things have to be at least 50 years old in order to be protected. So around this time in 1981, a lot of things were, turning 50 years old. Or for instance, Lincoln Park now is probably about 70 years old. Lincoln Park is not protected. But had they protected back in 1981, we would see a different character of how the downtown Black commercial district should be looking. Now, when I say Black commercial district, there really is no such thing, because the historians never declared it as a district, which it is. It's clearly a district. Well, so that's another argument, but that is so important. We have got to restore that.
Well, that, and what's the diversity of the planning commission, the Historic Preservation Commission been? Has it included a number of folks of color, Black folks, or has it been predominantly white over the years? What's that been like?
Oh, it's always been predominantly white since its inception, but Black people have served. We've had one city councilwoman serve. I understand,
like one at a time kind of thing?
Yeah, one at a time. And then we've had a Black an attorney, I understand, a Black woman from our community to serve. So these are people who are well versed in the language of the commission, but that's not to say they saw what I saw, because when you're in there on those commission meetings, you're addressing issues that are before you at the time. You're not in there observing, well, is this right or this, so I don't expect them to see what I saw based on something that happened in 1981, because no one's talking about that anymore.
Or it may not know the history itself.
Right. And there's no reason for them to, because we're talking about 1980, we're talking about 40 years ago. So I don't expect for them to even look at what I looked at with fresh eyes.
Right. Well, one of the things you brought up when we chatted the other day, and I can't remember who made me aware of it, but generally when white Valdostans, and I don't know if this is the case for folks of color, think of the historic section of Valdosta, it's basically west of Oak Street in, what is that, the Riverview neighborhood?
Well, the world,
on River Street, right?
The world knows that historically speaking, when you go to a tiny town, you want to see some Black history. You want to, in a southern town, you want to see some Black stuff. You want, the Crescent Home and those fine, beautiful homes, I love them too, are great. But tourists want to see what's going on in the South that's really South. And that's Black people. We are part of the Southern history. In this town, we've been cut completely out.
Yeah, but that doesn't surprise you with white folks, does it?
Yes, that surprises me. I'm disappointed.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't be disappointed, but my point is that you're doing work around this. The way the Preservation Society drew the historic line
Mhm.
really excluded Black folks, didn't it?
Yes, and over 40 years, and I've had someone say, "Well, that didn't happen. That happened way before me." I've had people say that, and but your job is to protect all of what's inside
Oh, everything
Valdosta and
historic,
Lowndes County
right?
of historical integrity. How can you sit on a board, even if you're not sitting on it for all 40 years, 20 years, and observe that one segment of your history, of your town's history, is just being erased, eradicated, and you're part of that process and not say anything about it?
No, I'm with you.
Over 40 years? Come on now. Somebody should have noticed it.
That just speaks to me that those of us who are white erase. We don't. Black history is American history, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
those neighborhoods with those historic architectural structures and homes in them that have Black folks all of a sudden become invisible, right?
They are. Look at historic Weisenbaker home Lane. Weisenbaker Lane is probably one of the most depressed neighborhoods in our community, or it has a reputation as such. But it's one of the most historical in the state of Georgia.
Right.
Huge tourism draw. But you can never, do you think the people in tourism, even that, though it's been exposed and found since the May, do you think anybody's tried to go over there and see it, actually see what it is and how it looks? It's not even remnants of it left. It's a lot of it left to show people how it looked. That is so important. Dasher High School, huge tourism draw. And I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I got in trouble last radio interview I did. I said something, but I apologize if I said anything to insult anybody. But well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't say it.
Well, you're really working hard with folks to redraw that line, right?
Yes, the local historic district line should be redrawn, and it's being worked on right now because that 1981 law says every 40 years you have to come back and resurvey. But we know from research that the city council has the voting power to modify the line before every 40 years. Who's going to be alive the next 40 years? So if we don't do it now, while the process is saying you can, we'll have to do it the other way, which is outside of the boundary of that law.
Well, and so are you saying then that right now city council could vote on this and redraw it regardless of what the Preservation Commission says?
Yes.
Gotcha. Have y'all or your group talked to council about this? And what is their reaction?
Yes. They're still reacting. We did have one person, because we've gone before the council, the Historic Preservation Commission. Dr. Alfred Willis, our architectural historian, who has been working for us pro bono with explaining to us, because he's a historian, he knows what he's talking about backwards and forwards. And it went with us in May and told the board that they were operating on antiquated principles. You can't expect for a house that belongs to the Crescent House to be transformed to a house in Weisenbaker Lane. But right now, those are the standards that they're operating by.
Right.
What was your question?
Well, I mean, so have you talked with council members about getting them to just do the vote and redraw?
No, I don't even know how to begin to start that dialogue. I don't know them that well. I am introducing two were at our event this past Saturday. Thank you all, Councilwoman Tooley and Councilwoman Miller Cody, for coming by and talking to us and just meeting people that we're in their districts. So I've not had a chance to sit down one-on-one to talk to them about what I think our strategy should be going forward. I do know we need the expertise of the architectural historian to help us and guide us, because he's already pointed out to me that there's so few structures left in the Black Historic District, well, which we don't have it declared yet, the Black Commercial District, that it's going to be very hard to even get it declared a district now because they let so many buildings crumble. You see, so there's different complexities to the issue of historical planning and historical review and historical preservation. The argument that Black people somehow cannot comply to those standards, which are not even that high, is just insulting to me.
Right. Well, those standards generally have to do with exterior matters, right? Like roofing.
Doors, changing a door, changing a window, changing a roof. However, they already have made concessions about corporate historical preservation in terms of finding cheaper material to replace things with that they think should be replaced.
So a precedent has been set.
So why not because I know of a property owner in the historic district is having trouble trying to replicate. That's crazy. Why are you going to, because it's not like they're going to come in your house and touch the material and see if it's real oak.
Right.
So why not give them a cheaper way to replace that window than going through all that trouble trying to get, but because they're doing it already for the corporate entities.
Right.
They're making shortcuts with them.
Well, and if the city were to redraw that line to encompass these historic structures in Black neighborhoods, would that open up funding sources for rehabilitation of those structures and all that?
Absolutely, it would. With every layer over that. Okay, the South Side Historic District is one layer, or it's just a district. When you put that local historic district over that layer of the South Side History, you're giving it then more incentives now because yes, you qualify for more. Right now, people with the little layer that we have, we're not protected from demolition. Dasher High School can be torn down. If Coastal Plain, I think that's like a quasi-governmental entity.
I think so, yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen with their board, but they are in because they paid to put their name on that historical marker that we hope to have by the end of this year. So they'll be on this. So they're in with preserving that building. They understand how important it is. But what if something happens, a new board comes along, change of heart, money drives everything. It's gone.
Yeah, right.
Because it's not protected.
Yeah, well, and how many, because I do work with the folks at Webb Miller Community Church up in Hayhira, which is my understanding one of the remaining segregated school buildings that remains. West Side, I think, was one. And then there's an old school on the east side of town, I think on 84 maybe. Are all those old Black schools that existed during segregation? Have I got that right? And it was Dasher too?
Yes.
Yeah, that's all right.
Dasher was one of the main ones. Right. They were all important.
Well, and what confused me was when I think of Dasher, I think of the place Dasher, right, south of 41.
Well, it was named after Dasher. The Dasher subdivision is over there. Right. Dasher's Nursery, one of our hugest sponsors. They are part of our beautification campaign. We've already begun planting azaleas. I'm gonna adopt my street, Hudson Street, and with my cousin who lives up on the corner, and we're gonna plant azaleas along that entire street. But anyway, they understand the importance of beautification. Our kids, they get up and they go places and they see nothing but that. And then when they go on the other side of town, they see beauty and trees and flowers. And what are they to think about their own people in there? Right. So they are indoctrinated in their minds when they're little. Okay, well, this is us and this is them and we'll never be different. Yeah. That's what you're setting up in your kids' mind. I don't care how much you teach them about Black history. Yeah. They know what they see.
Yeah, so the city then kind of should be motivated, given maybe federal and state preservation dollars that would come in to redraw the line, wouldn't it?
Yes, look at all the money they're losing in tourism dollars. Yeah. My husband and I love Westerns. That's one thing I'll sit with him and watch. There's a bunch of Westerns back to back. And we love Doc Holliday.
Hmm.
I don't even hear much about Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
We would promote Doc Holliday on the South Side at a Black restaurant or at a jazz alley. One of the ideas we talked about when we first started our group, let's bring back the jazz alley with Ella Fitzgerald and the vibe. In fact, that's our new theme, bring back the vibe. Let's let's just bring it back. We don't have, there are things we can do without permission.
Yeah. Well, and are people familiar, and I forgot the name of the club that you're trying to save, but
the Liberty Theater.
Liberty Theater, right?
Liberty Theater.
Where pretty much anybody who was in the jazz music scene in the 50s rolled through. Ella Fitzgerald was here, other giants, right?
Duke Ellington, Count Basie.
Do folks know that?
Not as much as they're getting ready to find out, because that's our new theme now. And John McCall, the artist who painted the watercolor that's on the front of
do you have it there?
Yes, let's see.
Can you just hold it up to the camera?
I was showing it to you yesterday, and I was looking for it today, and I did find, I said, let me just find it.
And pretty much the shell of this building still exists, right?
It's on our website.
Yeah, the shell, and this is right by, right, yeah, right by the overpass. But yeah,
how's this?
Yeah, that's a little bit higher. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so the shell of that building is still, the exterior shell is still there.
Now, why would anyone want to leave the shell of a building for us to just pass by day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade? Why do we want to see, even it just looks horrible.
Well, and there's no plaque or anything there that says who was in that building.
Because the Historical Preservation Commission, which is charged with preserving our history, legally cannot govern that part of our town because by law.
Because it's not in the line?
Right. And so they're silly to go outside of that. That's crazy. Well,
but that would be a great strategy to get rid of things you don't want to keep. I'm not saying that's what they did, but like,
you know absolutely. What I mean? Bit by bit, it's gone. They're chipping away. But why, when we went to the meetings and then the demonstrations that we saw of how they preserve within that district, they even paint the boards that are boarded up windows over on the inside that district that are in the predominantly white neighborhood. They even paint them the same color as the exterior of the paint on the outside. You don't even know, you think it's art. You don't even know it's a boarded up building. You think it's part of the facade of the building. Right. It's so cleverly hidden. And then they pay maintenance people to keep the areas mown and keep everything tidy. They go through all kinds of trouble to keep that area tidy. If our area had been included, it wouldn't look the way it looks. The reason they've got black young people thinking, oh, our area looks bad because we Black. They've got people thinking this, oh, that's the Black side. Because no, it's methodical.
Well, I think the other thing I think about in pushing 6 decades now is not only that, but also that we don't have a history. You know what I mean? Because it's literally been erased from the landscape. And one of the things I've thought a lot about, and the folks of color in my life have pushed me to think a lot about, is as we do political work here, it's hard over the years to get Black folks to stand up and speak up, but usually because they're employed by some white controlled business or system. You know what I mean? Versus
kind of.
Well, and I think, well, and
I just, you're right.
The data I've seen suggests that in the 1970s, there were more Black owned businesses than there are now. Right. And the data I've seen, and I don't want to romanticize segregation because it wasn't romantic, right? But I've also talked to enough elders and seen data on this. There's a great book called After Brown
Okay.
And
Brown versus
that's
Board.
about the Brown versus Board
Mhm.
decision, right? Which was in
Mhm.
54, but wasn't enforced until the 1970s here. So when we talked the other day, we talked about Pinevale,
Mhm.
right? And my sister got bused to Pinevale and people got bused to other schools. But I bring that up because when we look at the data, the graduation rates during segregation here and the people that went on to college were higher than they are now for folks of color. Like in Black controlled institutions and Black controlled schools. And I don't know if you found this or not, when, because I know you're doing a lot of oral history stuff too, but I've heard story after story, having lived here 50 plus years, from Black folks here that talked about that desegregation was really a part of it was Black folks having to give up control and then go work in those that got hired in the white system. All of a sudden principals weren't principals anymore. Have you heard this?
Oh, that was probably one of the saddest moments in our Black heritage history in Valdosta and Lowndes County when total desegregation took place. And yes, our most gifted leaders, teachers, administrators were displaced when they had to go to other schools. So our band director, Mr. Marshall, who was brilliant, was no longer band director at Valdosta High School. He was an assistant band director. And of course, this brilliant man who got those students from generation to generation by this time, they're marching in precision. They are brilliant musicians because those educators from that era had to teach everything. Not only did they have to teach their subject of choice, they had to teach them outside delicacies.
Like without the resources that the white schools had.
All right, so they taught them courtesy, etiquette, like Mrs. Council. She did over and beyond what she was supposed to by teaching us how to speak and etiquette. I mean, elocution exercises. So Mr. Marshall, excuse me.
That's a funky ringtone.
It gets me a lot.
Well, and I guess I'm just asking a bigger question that I think relates to what happened to Black businesses is that you know, because Dr. King made a big distinction between desegregation and integration. And I think he was deeply concerned about the loss of power that Black folks might experience.
Let me finish, Mark.
No, I'm sorry,
that was a great question about, and I'm getting to that. The band, yes, Mr. Marshall did lose his. Mr. Revels, our chorus director, lost his job. Coaching, the head coaches who were great coaches lost their positions, and the children saw this happen in our community. We didn't know. We knew that we might be. Somebody might call us the N-word or something like that, but I don't think we really understood how deeply it was affecting the generation over us. Right. But we could see the depression. We saw an increase of different things that happened, like increase in alcoholism, increase in despair among some of these people who just didn't know how to handle being great and looked up to by your community. All of a sudden now you're being displaced. Right. And so these same people who looked up to you now, and the kids don't understand, they know white and Black, but then we're not being taught to hate whites. Right. See, that's what I don't understand about the climate now, because we actually went through it, but we were never taught to hate white people or to all the things that I'm hearing now. And I think that's largely why we're so successful. Your question about more children graduating during desegregation, during segregation than desegregation, yes, because we were pushed, and we were not just pushed only in the area of which we had gifts and strengths. We were well-rounded. We were taught how to use correct silverware at a table. We were taught etiquette. All of that went away with integration. Right. Well, and many of the study, and this wasn't just here in Valdosta, but you know, when I worked and did research in North Carolina, that's the same thing you found. What desegregation did not mean was, let's take the best of the white system, the best of the Black system, get together as a community and design an inclusive system.
It was basically, okay, you've complained too much. We're losing our federal dollars. We're going to let you come, but we're not, you're not going to run the place, right? You're not going to be an administrator over here. You're not going to get disciplined the same way. You're not going to be taught the same way. In fact, we really don't want you here. We really
Exactly.
resent you being here, right? And white kids didn't have that experience. And I say this with the most shame that I could muster. Like, we talked about Ruth Council, and I told you about a 6th grade teacher. So our WG Nunn was desegregated, and they sent 2 black kids in my grade, and I'll never forget them because they really changed how I saw black folks. It was Wendell Lewis and Titus Coleman. I think Titus is now up in Tifton. I haven't heard from or about Wendell for years and years and years. But my point is that I think they were the only 2 young black boys in my 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th grade class, right? And we started playing baseball together, and everything I had been told about black folks, they proved wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
And I heard that too. When I integrated Valdosta Junior High, I was probably the only black kid in majority of my classes during that time. But we started out this first days of freedom of choice. I was a freedom of choice student. So my mother, who was an educator, decided she wanted me to have new books, and she wanted me to be exposed to the same kind of teaching and instruction she said that the white kids were exposed to. That was all she said.
Well, and can I interrupt? Can I ask you a quick question though? Because when I look through the newspapers about this, especially here, white folks weren't overtly saying we don't want our kids going with black kids. They were saying that we should have school choice. The racism was couched in this language that didn't tell the truth.
And that's what freedom of choice was. And so we took advantage of it. My mother did, and some other people in the community, and decided to send their kids to integrate. But of course, none of the white kids came over to our side.
Right.
So that was an attempt to stave off total desegregation.
Right.
I was a precursor to it. And I think we were just guinea pigs, really, because there were really not any big bad incidents or anything. But we started out, and the little white kids would be over here. And you know what my biggest fear was that I would never be able to make friends with any of them, because they all looked alike. All of them. The boys and the girls. And so my fear was, oh my God, how am I going to tell them apart? And of course that went away in like something like maybe 30 minutes, and then I was able to distinguish, but I'd never been around that many white people at one time. So I remember that from all those years ago. And then we started out, the white kids would not look at me. They would, sometimes if we were walking down the hall and they would see me coming, they would get as far away on the other side as they possibly could. They would, when we would be somewhere where we're not in a controlled seating area, they would sit as far away. That went on for about maybe a week or 2, and then after that went away. That kind of behavior, we were all the same. We were just all kids again. You were kids. So that went away, and I heard what you heard, what you said, or you dispel that myth. And I heard it from some of those girls, and that I ended up really feeling really close to in junior high school, that they thought we black people were different. I heard that from them.
Well, and I just remember Miss Jackson, my first black teacher, having to endure the N-word. And I say this,
you're right.
And I'm one that probably said it, to tell you the truth. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, seriously,
Mark, I know what you're talking about.
And she, she suffered. Like when I look back, and she was probably one of the few black teachers in the whole school. She sat by herself at lunch. Like, I don't know what happened to her, but I can't imagine the damage we did, or just at least the cruelty that we all showed, and her having to put up with a bunch of little white kids calling her the N-word.
Wow. See, I didn't know about that. Mrs. Council mentioned how isolated she was at WG Nunn. She was the first black teacher to integrate that school. She was a 2nd grade teacher. But she, and I have it on I have the unedited reel of my interview. I interviewed with him about 3 hours. And Mark, I was so excited to be talking to my idol I think I talk more about myself than I let them talk about themselves, but she was isolated too, like
yeah.
you're describing about Mrs. Jackson. She was saying that for the first year or so, she said that they wouldn't talk to her. They wouldn't. So, but look at how we helped. We helped and the white teachers did too, because most of them were really nice. There were a few bad ones in each grade, but most of them were really nice. So you can't condemn a whole
yeah, no, that's not where I'm going with it, because again,
I know you're not.
well, and I think what we know from the research is when humans have to live and be with one another, we figure out each other's human, right? But if we stay separated, it's easy to think we're not human, right? So that's important, I guess. To go back to the preservation question though, because it's all connected to
it is, yes,
right? And I think it's a discussion we haven't had as a nation of what was the cost of desegregation, right? What was it the cost to the Black commercial section of town, whether it's desegregation or eminent domain or just being left out of the decision-making process with community planning?
That came from people.
Yeah.
People, not the process, but the people who were behind that process making
racist whose history matters.
Huh?
I think there's also this, whether it's conscious or unconscious, if we erase the artifacts of our past as it relates to segregation and the wrongs that were done, I think it's a way those of us who are white can pretend it never happened.
And that is what's going on. One of the local elected city officials recently, who's white, sent me, and I'm not telling you anything I haven't said to anybody else, sent me an answer to my invitation to come to our community meet and greet. And I also asked him something else other than that. And so, I asked him about funding for the continuation of the surveying that we were already doing on the South Side for the purpose of expanding the line.
Well, and tell folks about that, because that's important. Y'all have already done a lot of the groundwork to get the line changed.
What the city has budgeted for are people to come in here and do the surveying to get the line changed, but we already have one of the most eminent historians in our group that can do that and has done it.
Pro bono.
Pro bono. Right. So in order for him, and he hasn't asked me for any of this, but it's not fair for him to not be paid doing all this work. So I'm really asking this man who actually heard our presentation at that city council meeting in May. He answers me that they do a lot of supporting of Black events in the neighborhood. And that I should get in touch with the Lowndes County Historical Society. Right. When I told Donald Davis, he didn't understand why. So anyway, because I know the Lowndes County Historical Society. In fact, it was through them that I met this architectural historian, Dr. Alfred Willis. He's brilliant. Yeah. And anyway, and he equated expanding the local historic district line with, I'm going to get in trouble again, with Juneteenth. And something else. I'm not discounting the importance of Juneteenth, but it's just not on the same level.
So why did he conflate those two?
He was purposely, as you said before in the statement before, purposely pretending he didn't know what I was talking about, because they're erasing stuff, and eventually it's gone. So who remembers and who cares? Right. So he's purposely mischaracterized my
what you were talking about,
and equated it to something that's totally different. And so when Black people hear me say, well, Juneteenth is very important, of course it is important to our community. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's not on this. Juneteenth is a celebration. We're talking about expanding a line that will affect our community forever, economically, where it counts in our pocketbook. Right. So it's not people not understanding the issues, and I'm really not as intelligent on some of these issues as I should be. So I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly trying to understand, as you said, we should, what about the minutes? What did the minutes say? How did this? We need to study minutes. We need to know the pattern of votes and why people are doing this.
What was said.
Yeah, exactly. And who said it?
Yeah, exactly. how is and I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but we have a Lowndes Historical Society, right? And,
Mhm,
I
mhm,
have I told you I know Donald Davis.
mhm.
I worked for his dad when I was a young guy. Are
Oh, wow.
have they been advocates for what you're trying to do? Have they been kind of silent? Where are they at with things? If you
They are our most ardent advocates.
Cool.
They are the only institution here that actually has done anything to preserve our history. And they have been trying to get our community to donate more. So they're happy that we've started this. They're
Yeah.
very much a part of my advisory little group of, I have a few people who advise me of things here, only a few, and they are part of that. So you okay?
That's good.
I trust them. Harry Evans knew my father. He knew of his work as a brick mason, and he remembered his uncle contracting my dad. He could tell me things about my dad's work that I didn't know. Um, I was introduced then to Dr. Alfred Willis, who was his uh, architectural historian who knew all about my daddy's work and the quality of that work. And then he researched along with Harry other information about really prominent brick masons in Valdosta during a certain part of our history and what they worked on. And it just ended up being so amazing. It
In
was
terms of
fact, it
what
was
they built.
yes, and all the homes that they are helped build on the north side, some of them are inside the local historic district, but the homes that they lived in on the south side are not even included in preservation. That's how weird this thing feels to me. And so Alfred said that he, I don't think he's well liked because he's bringing out a lot of these discrepancies. So these discrepancies. So he's not really looked fondly upon right now by certain people in the community, as I understand it, because we are not supposed to know a lot of this stuff. So as a result of his education, we're now learning how important Antioch is with the brickwork, the amazing brickwork on that church.
Yeah.
How would we know that otherwise if someone like him didn't tell us? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we want to keep him working. And for someone in that of that stature and serving that long, sitting on a banking committee, owning a store, businessman, huge commercial man, for him to pretend he didn't understand what I was saying is just ludicrous.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And these people should be ashamed. Anybody who's going around pretending that they love this city and it's a city without limits, they have not paid a visit to the other side of town lately. Yeah. The man who has replaced James Horton as the historic planning director, his name is Jeff. I'm not sure of what his last name is. I would like to meet him soon. I bet you he has not even been in the Black community yet. He should drive over there. He should, and then he should drive. There's a different experience going across that overpass and entering in the community, and then the experience going back. They're two different experiences. And then when you go back under the overpass, that's another horrible experience. And then when you come back in the other direction, under the overpass, that's another bad experience. There is no way that's a good way. And when you get on top of that overpass, you can see the difference. If you look out among the city, you can see the difference physically with your eyes. There's a line of demarcation that separates. Who should be proud of that?
Well, and a couple of things that we haven't mentioned that are ongoing processes is the white flight from Valdosta to the north. You know, I think within 20 years, will be an Albany, Lee County kind of phenomenon. No, seriously.
Well,
and you know, Hahira, the real estate prices up there are off the chain because that's where people are going, right? Wow. So we have kind of ongoing white flight here that nobody talks about, nobody on council in terms of the shifting demographics. You know, we also just have these other chronic problems that 1 in 3 Valdostans own their home, right? 1 in 3. We've got a poverty rate of about 34%. In 2010, 40% of kids in Valdosta lived in poverty. Mm-hmm. So all that's going on at the same time, like I sat in on the city council's retreat, 2-day retreats. I was there I didn't stay for both full days. I couldn't, but I was there for 5 hours or so. And
That's
there
good.
is this renovation discussion talk, right, about downtown Valdosta, but I would argue it's really so white folks who fled can come down on the weekends and have a nice meal and have their drinks and walk to the art thing or go to the theater. It's nothing outside of the literal downtown center, right? Nothing past the overpass.
Oh, no.
So-
There, these people who are running our city are making decisions for its citizens. Those people that you've just described would be just as happy coming to a nice, flourishing Black side in the commercial district, frequenting Black restaurants, Black coffee shops, Black
well, the Black
nail
businesses
shops,
down, even the most recent
bookshops.
ones, you know, we had a Cajun place for years, Black owned, that kind of got run out. We had a barbecue place downtown that kind of got run out, in
Well,
more or less words, right?
let me ask you this, Mark. This is what I was going to say, and I decided not to. I don't want people mad at me, but I'm going to say this. If New Orleans, which is a horrible place other than French Quarter, could take that little 2 streets, I think there's a very tiny area, and turn it into an international destination of tourism based on that history, why can't we do something similar in Valdosta based on our history? What makes them so more special than us? You know, it's the people that are planning. Those people who are planning our city are afraid of Black people. They don't want their wives nor their daughters coming over to the Black side. There's this something that I haven't felt since I integrated the schools all those years ago. That kind of fear. I used to hear it all the time then, but after.
Yeah, but the other thing I think is happening, especially because of the web, and as documents are digitized and scanned that have been hidden in archives and so forth. I mean, we did significant research on street names in Valdosta. You know, Dasher was a major slaveholder. You know, the Dasher, that whole, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about Confederate soldiers of Patterson and Ashley, who was slave, right? I mean, I think that's the other thing is that, and this is why there's this whole, you know, boogeyman of CRT now, right? I think
that's insulting to me, my husband, and my son.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I don't like it. Now they need to bring them. They need to get themselves over here and feel comfortable with us and just enjoy our culture.
White folks are not good. We are not good. We like history as long as we're the hero.
Well, you know what? I beg to differ with you there. I don't believe that entirely. No, I've worked with some white historians for a long time, not just here, but also in Douglasville. And that is not, I don't find that to be the case.
Well, white people dedicated. I just had lunch with a local historian that just wrote a book on J.L. Lomax, right? White dude.
Dr. Thomas Aiello.
There you go. So
he was a guest at our.
Gotcha. We just had pizza at Mellow, right? We were talking about all this stuff. There are exceptions, I would argue. But the general everyday white person, yeah.
Can you edit this out or stop this?
Hey, I'll just pause the recording while you get it. How about that?
Okay. Yes.
Well, we were just talking about that there are white historians that are willing to tell the truth and dive off into it. I think they're the exception, not the rule. You know, because you know, we have. Black history is my history if I'm from the South. You know what I mean? My history is connected to Black history, but we even talk about those things as distinct because those of us who are white, we want to always feel good when it comes to talking about history.
All right, let me tell you something, Mark. When I was at WTCG, there was only really one white person on this girl, and she was from Tallahassee, Florida. And every time she talked to me, she felt a need to mention her Black maid named Gladys. Every conversation. She didn't understand. I already had been through that game when I was at Valdosta Junior High because every single one of those white girls made sure I knew they had a Black maid. So that, you know, that didn't bother me.
Yeah.
Because I'm past that now. You know, that integration helped me deal with stuff like that. I'm serious. So integration
I got you.
helpful to me. I am not ashamed of slavery.
Hmm.
See, Black people are ashamed of slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery is just one aspect of our American history. The slaves are why we are free Americans and Black Americans. We're not from the continent of Africa. I'm a Black American. Now, I don't know about you other folks, but my grandmama wasn't from Africa. My great grandmama didn't come from Africa, and I'm sure her mother didn't, may, I don't know. But I traced my people back to America. And I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of what the slaves died and sacrificed for me to be in this country. I think that's a slap in their face every time somebody says something ugly about it. And you can't erase that history? Was crazy.
Oh, we're doing it.
You can't tear down statues and change names of streets and use these as an opportunity to teach our children about local history, about state history, national. You can't rewrite our history. That's the craziest thing I ever heard of.
No, I'm not suggesting we rewrite it. I suggest that we just tell the truth about it. And
I suggest that we keep it as it is and keep educating people, and people need to stop putting all of their beautiful energy into tearing things down and just start our country. A lot of people in this country don't even know we're only 250 something. How old are we? 251 years old.
The bicentennial was 76, right? So that's
you're gonna make me go back that far.
224. We're coming up on 250 years.
Right. This is so.
But I think this conversation relates to why those historic structures in what are now Black neighborhoods, right? Because I imagine when they were built, many of them weren't Black neighborhoods. Is that fair to say?
Well, it doesn't matter, but yes.
Well, no, but
that's fair to say. Yes.
Yeah, like and what I would suggest, it seems to me that since they're now predominantly Black spaces, that to the almost all white preservation board, they just don't matter. I'm not saying that's right. I think it's totally wrong.
But it does to a true historian. When you find quarters housing, you find quarters housing, something that doesn't even exist anymore. How can you not get excited about that? And you know what? They're not excited.
but the reason they're not excited is that it reminds us of what we haven't dealt with.
Well, then all we got to do is deal with it now.
I'm with you. And I'm with it. I'm with you. That's what this conversation's about, right?
You're giving me an opportunity to talk. Dr. Deborah Tan on Foxy 97.5 radio interviewed me in depth. And so she triggered some thoughts. You're the second person who was really asking me questions about what I'm doing and why. So you're causing me to think and explore more and go in different directions with my thinking, which I kind of really hadn't thought about some of that stuff you're suggesting. So I appreciate your, being adversarial, not really in your questioning.
You haven't seen me as adversarial yet.
I don't want to see it either.
Just kidding. No. Well, no, but I think we have to, this kind of conversation, something we should be having as communities, right?
No, I think it's too much conversation going on. I think we need.
Well, no, I'm just talking about.
I'm kind of joking with you. I know what you mean.
Yeah, but why aren't we saving these structures, right? Why do we? And the question's an important one. Why do some get saved and others don't? Why do lines get drawn particular ways, and why can't we change them if the past is dead and gone? You know what I mean? Like, that stuff is very much still alive in the hearts and minds of many folks.
That hardcore racism is, and then you've got powerful people in Valdosta who might be hardcore racists, who are in very, very important positions, and then a lot of it's hidden, through a lot of stuff. So there's a reason why we're not being treated properly. We're not even talked to that well, even on the telephone. It's just a general lack of respect. I don't even think our elected officials are even treated that well among different people in government.
We know that locally for sure.
You know, so your conversation does need to be held about that specifics. Other problems that we're encountering are problems that can be corrected from within, within that system. We can't, you know, the city council can vote, they can change ordinances, they can modify, they just need a good attorney.
Well, let me ask you this, because it doesn't sound like, because a lot of times you can hold municipalities accountable. Like, so for example, we've struggled with the Valdosta city school system before and could get nowhere with them. So we went above them to the Department of Justice and filed a civil rights complaint. And then when that complaint is investigated, we had a different conversation. So given that, like, it sounds though that the enforcement, there's no way to really put pressure on municipalities to save historic homes and structures based on that line, right? From outside, like the National Historic Society or any of those folks. There's really no one to report to that, hey, they're tearing down history and heritage.
I don't think they know. I know people, because as I told you, I put something on the register. I don't think they have a clue as to what really has happened to this city in terms of their tearing down our historic treasures. As recently as last Christmas, they tore down one of the oldest buildings in the state of Georgia, in the region, really. It's the Phyllis Wheatley Reading Club. If you heard of those,
tell folks where that was and what it was. If
it was on West Hill Avenue, between the Torrance's house and Alexander's home. Beautiful little, looked like a little baby doll house almost. It was so cute, but it was built as a reading club for people like my great grandmother, you know, around 1890 maybe, or 1900s. So because those girls could not go to the library, the current library, that's the story that I'm told. And so their dads and their granddads, these people who were post-slavery product, built that house because they were high on education. Those people back then, oh my goodness gracious, they were such sticklers for our being educated. So they built that little building for those little young girls. My great grandmother went there as a child reading, and this was the Phyllis Wheatley Reading Club. They tore it down knowing that we wanted it to be preserved. The Historic Planning Commission knew that. Matt Martin over the Planning and Zoning Department, in fact, he answered the phone the morning it was being torn down. I was here in Douglasville. I got a call from the Lowndes County Historical Society, Donald Davis, Harry Evans. They went out there, they took pictures to salvage at least that for me. They called me and told me it was being torn down. Vicki Everett ran down there, who was part of our group, took more pictures. They were so upset and so hurt. James Horton had gone to watch it. And so I called, asked James, what happened? I was literally in tears. And Matt Martin answers James Horton's phone. And I knew it wasn't James, but I knew it was Matt. And I called him Matt. And I said, Matt, this is Gwen. What happened to the Mary Church Terrell building? Do you know what he said to me? You need to call permit. And that was it.
Can I ask about that specific example? Because it's the most recent, right? Did Donald and them do anything other than, did they get in touch with the historical preservation folks, or did they go to city council and say, don't tear this thing down? And what was their reason for tearing it down?
No. And that is why I went before them in May and specifically went on the record for them not to tear down that Quola building. You're absolutely right, because I said, if I get this over, because we heard from Matt Martin at a Historic Preservation Commission meeting that we attended. The last one we went to was in May. This is just July. Matt Martin said at that meeting, after the meeting is over, this is off the record, he says, announces, did you know the Quola building is going to be torn down? Everybody heard it. So the very next week, I go before the city council and I asked them on record, please do not tear down this building, just to put it on the record. And I told them that it was something we heard at the Historic Planning Commission meeting. I did not tell them who we heard it from, but I'm telling people now, it was from him, Matt Martin. And why else would he say that? Why would he say that out loud for everybody to hear it? So of course, I'm going to go and advocate for that. I was getting ready to go back to Douglasville, and I stayed for that meeting just to get that on the record. The Lowndes County Historical Society probably could have gone in and put that on record for city council, don't destroy this building. But how are they supposed to know they're going to destroy it when everybody knew how important it was? And I don't think they knew it was happening. They were taken off guard. Even James Horton, who has since left, was surprised.
He was on the preservation.
He was over for the city of Valdosta. He's over the entire department. The historic preservation is volunteer commission.
Right.
It's governed by his office, though, James Horton's office, but he's no longer there. He was shocked and surprised.
What was their rationale for destroying it?
Well, it was owned by a businessman. It was, it was on his property. And he'd been trying, I understand he'd been trying to get rid of it. And once they thought of turning it into an office, that didn't work. Building that overpass made it a lot easier to get rid of because people stopped seeing it.
Right.
They stopped even seeing it on the landscape. So I heard it was being ravaged by termites. And then I said, well, termites can be treated. The building was not crumbling down. That was the excuse they gave. But the point was permit, which Matt Martin told me to call, as though he didn't even know me, call permit. That I thought that was sensitive and cold.
Yeah.
That's why I just don't, he should have been nicer if he were not part of it. He would have said, Gwen, I'm so sorry. We tried to stop it. We couldn't, I would have accepted that. Right. But permit has to get a permission.
Right, to tear it down.
Tear stuff down. They don't just, it's like me taking your address and going to permit, here, take this to go over there and tear down Mark's house. Yeah. And they just say, okay, how much does it cost? How much does it cost when you tear down Mark's house? Oh, $50. You can't just tear down stuff like that. That's why I know. Now, that needs to be investigated.
Yeah. Well, and I'm looking right now, evidently, and tell me if I get this wrong, the Phyllis Wheatley kind of literary social societies or clubs were all over the US, right?
And we had one tourism draw. Look at all this tourism stuff.
Is there anything about it in the historic society? Because there's something, I thought it would. Don't they have a display that?
Yeah, it was at our event Saturday.
Okay, yeah,
because let me use it.
Yeah, well, it's downstairs. It used to be downstairs is where I've seen it.
Beautiful display.
Yeah.
Thank goodness they had it. They knew how important it was. And there's a story behind how they got those panels, but they loaned two to us for our event Saturday. And one of the direct descendants of one of the owners of the building, Arthur James Edward Alexander, was there, and he's taking a picture next to the panels. But he's in his 80s, but the lady who owned one of the houses on the other side of it, actually she owned part of the Phyllis Wheatley Club. And I'm kin to all those people along that West Hill Avenue strip, so it's hard to say, but they were all kin, and they each owned a half of that house. The ladies, the matriarchs of each of those homes, the matriarch of one of those homes was his great aunt. So he's standing there next to the panel with her, it was just a beautiful affair. Oh, just beautiful. So the society is I think they're doing a great job. They hopefully now, I've been promoting them and trying to get more Black people in the community involved with the museum and with helping them with their base and letting them know that they are appreciated by us, because they're the only ones that have really methodically and historically and over the decades preserved the history.
Yeah, some of it. But
it's I know.
Well,
Mark,
I just say this because I love Donald, but we've struggled a little bit.
Well, hey,
that's all good.
That's healthy.
But those historical societies were also, created after the Civil War to kind of retell the history too, right? But you're right, and I'm with you. I get it.
They were like that at first. I remember when I went there as a high school student, I believe, and I was not made to feel welcome, but I was always fascinated by that building. And I remember one day I had a car, so it had to have been maybe college. So I remember stopping by there, going in there, just curious about it. I thought it was so beautiful. And I was met with a very, very cold welcome.
Yeah. So they just have things we know about that we've had to ask to see because they're never on display.
Well,
and that's that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a whole nother thing.
I know, and
What,
I know that I know what you're saying. There's something
yeah,
to it. I know that,
yeah.
Mark.
Well, where are things at now with redrawing that boundary?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm hoping the planner, the new fellow who's taken James' place, can tell me when I want to sit down and actually talk to him. And but because they are not governed uh over the South Side Historic District, which is what I would be representing, he may not want to sit down and talk to me, but I believe he will. James Horton did, and he was, in fact, James Horton did stuff he wasn't supposed to do. He wasn't supposed to invite us to those meetings. He wasn't supposed to even talk to me about it because they're not even governed to
Required.
talk.
Yeah.
And Dr. Harry Ham at the following meeting that we went to made it very clear to us that we were not welcome, because he even asked us why were we even there
Yeah.
after we had been there for 2 months meeting, going through everything we were talking, the way I'm talking to you, talking to them. So he knew, but that was designed to make us feel unwelcome. So a lot of this attitude stuff still exists. It's open. Some of it's blatant.
Yeah.
Some of it's very well hidden. Either way, if we just go by our ordinances, if we read our ordinances, and if we see that there are faults in that ordinance, then it's our job as citizens to bring this to the attention of the elected officials. They don't know everything. Yeah. They need help in researching these laws. They don't know how to, some of them may not even know how to modify a law. Yeah. And then the city attorney, whose job it is to assist them in that area, may be bamboozling them. I'm sorry.
Don't get me started about our city attorney.
They may be purposely leading them in different. Oh, I'm getting in so much trouble. Yeah. They may be purposely misleading them. We don't know. I don't know.
Withholding information.
Yeah. Isn't that misleading, sort of selective?
Yeah, definitely.
So they may not even be given honest answers about things. So our job and my group, I hope, is that to come in and just research, read, try to change things that we can within the law, solicit and hopefully enjoy the support from people like you that will give me us an opportunity to voice this issue and try to explain it, because there's a lot of stuff that I just frankly don't have the answers to that you've asked me, but I'm thinking about, and I appreciate the contact information you gave me yesterday, or whatever day that was we talked. That's so much.
A couple days ago, I think. It's
all with you. So I'm going to. I didn't want to really do that right now because I didn't want too many things coming at me after you and I talk. But I'm going to call those gentlemen.
Yeah, the other thing you may, I don't know if you're here on a Sunday night, you may want to stop by the tribunal meeting.
Yes, I would.
It's at Serenity at 7:00. I'm sure they would love to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
And also, if I can ever be of any assistance, I'm more than willing to help out with this. And
thank you, Mark. Yeah. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for reaching out.
No, I think what you're doing is important. And I've really loved your Facebook page and kind of the oral histories that you're capturing as folks are getting older. They're not going to be with us, right? And remembering is crucial to the present as far as I'm concerned. And it gives us a frame of reference. And you said it earlier, for the generation that's coming along now that doesn't know what South Patterson looked like in the 70s and early 80s, have no idea that it was a very different place. So I just appreciate everything you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Both with individuals and with the physical landscape as well.
Well, thank you for your intellect, for your passion for what we're doing. Just thank you for everything you're doing to help us. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, it's my community too, and all that's our history, right?
Yes, it is.
Is there anything else you want to chat about before I cut you loose?
Well, of course there is.
What else?
The beautification campaign.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so that we kicking it off. We're kicking it off. We already started planting azaleas at the 100 house on the Branch Street side, which is MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. side. So we're going to challenge everybody with any personal property on that street, just start planting azaleas.
Nice.
So we're going to get somebody from the city to mark off where we can't plant.
Gotcha.
And then everybody else can just go for it.
Gotcha.
You
We're
know,
in Azalea City, right?
And that's why Dasher's, did you know Dasher's Nursery donated over $1,000 worth of plants to us for that event?
That's cool. Nice.
To kick off our beautification campaign, the ferns, all those beautiful ferns that we installed around the porch, they donated every single one of them.
Nice.
Have you go to the Facebook page and see what I'm talking about?
I saw some of the planning going on.
But did you see the fern across around that building that just wakes up that corner? Oh, Market wakes up that corner.
Cool.
And so now on Branch Street, we're going to do it going that direction. So that's going to be our biggest announcement. We can start planting in September. It's a little bit too hot now to plant, but we can start getting people revved up to start buying those azaleas and we'll get a crew out there with some shovels and some hoes and some, what do you call those weed whackers?
Yeah,
I know the name of that thing. And blowers, we'll clean up our mess. We just need to just start planting stuff. And if we do it this fall and do it again in spring of next year, and then do it again that fall of next year, do you know within 2 years, it would just, the whole neighborhood could look different?
Yeah.
Within 2 years. Within 2 years. And then once we're successful at that, people are inspired to do other things. Start a community garden. We got so many vacant lots. Hey, let's get together and plant some stuff. Food is so high. At least we'll know what we're putting in our system, some organic gardening. Yeah. People may be inspired to do stuff. Right now, it just seems so dismal and dreadful, and I don't see anything going on, and I'm tired of people infighting and fighting and blaming this and this one's. Hey, if everybody just do what you do well, and if everybody respects what everybody else is doing, we'll all be successful. Yeah. You don't have to be successful by putting somebody else down. That's not how it works, and white people, and I hear Black people talking about white people too. And I know they talk about us. I hear it too.
We don't talk about y'all. What do you think?
We know what's going on. I don't know why Black people try to be so upset when they hear somebody say the N-word. We already know. So, we just respect each other and just work together, and we don't have to like each other. We just have to work together and for the common good, which is for the benefit of our city. This is a beautiful town. I want to be proud of it. I want to be proud of all aspects of it. When people come for my funeral or your funeral, we want them to be able to come through the whole town and be proud. Not just that one, cross the bridge. That's where Gwen came from over here, where there's nothing. It's just sad. It's just sad the way our community.
And we can do better. And we can do better, right?
We should be, the elected officials should really be ashamed of the way this town looks. They shouldn't want anybody to come through this town and see the mess that they have gotten us in with the way it looks. It's just horrible. We can't explain it with a straight face. Okay, that's it.
I hear you. Thank you so much for today and taking the time. And again, for what you're doing, it's remarkable. And I love seeing those interviews, and I just think all this is crucial, so thank you. We
invite you to share your podcasts with us on our Facebook page. We invite you to interview other people that you find of interest on our page. We'll be happy to do that.
Sounds great.
And you keep doing what you're doing, Mark.
Okay.
Looking forward to meeting you.
Yeah, we'll do it sooner or later here.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.
All right.
All right.